Hey, welcome. Esoteric Dualism here. Back, I guess, with another Ask the Rabbi. If there's no questions, if no one's interested in asking me more questions, that's fine. I'll just go over some material I wanted to as a review mechanism. I might actually do two different streams tonight. And I wanted to present a little bit of stuff about Jewish history, some infographics, and then possibly go over the laws of hate speech in Hebrew, something very useful information. I might actually do a separate stream replying to my debate with JF about evolution, where I will demonstrate some positive evidence towards spiritualism, because in that I just took the negative towards evolution. So let me put it on presentation, screen share, and I'm going to give a little basic information that's useful to what I'm usually talking about, specifically Jewish history, timeline. People that want to know who are these Jewish people, where do we come from, how many are there us, what are these important events in Jewish history. And this is a big topic, extremely interesting to me. I've been studying this for really my whole life. In the last 5 years, I put intense study into this. So show him Mr. Wayne. So this beginning part might be interesting to you. I wish I had better information to give a better view. This is the best thing I could find for like a timeline. I'll show something else that has more just names of famous people. This is in the description. Timeline of Jewish history and heritage going back 3700 AD. According at the bottom is the Jewish conception according to the young Earth creationism. The world was created 5,778 years ago. This graph must be a little bit old because it only goes to 5760, so it's 18 years old. And you can see through the beginning, and here you have population, interesting today too. So here you have estimate about 13 to 15 million Jews, and you can see historically how many Jews there were over history, and the huge population explosion that happened in Europe. And you could see the graph here, where were the people. The yellow brownish is Asia, Africa, Turkey was mostly Israel. I mean, the blue is Israel, and then the yellow brownish is Africa, Asia, Turkey, and you have South America, Europe, and North America. So you don't have Jews in North America till very recently. And let me just check the chat. And so you can see the Egyptian and Canaanite. Here's population estimates. According to the Bible, 3 million Jews left. Let me just make sure. Yeah, okay. 3 million Jews left Egypt. So that's 1313, according to common understanding of history. That's 1300 years before the common era is the exodus out of Israel, and there's 3 million people till the rise of King Solomon, which is the peak of Israel's dominance, possibly even more so today. And King Solomon has about 40 years of peaceful rule. And according to this estimates here, the Jewish population of Israel in King Solomon's time gets up to about 5 million. And then you could see 924, after King Solomon passes away, the division of the kingdoms, Israel and Judah, and it starts the decline to the first temple. King Solomon, in the middle of his reign, builds the temple. That's about 957 before the Common Era. And after King Solomon passes away, starts the decline till eventually the exile of the 10 tribes in 720, till the complete destruction of Jerusalem by Babylon. And according to this, the number of Jews drops from 5 million to about 500,000. Here maybe even only 300,000 people. The Jewish people, God forbid, were almost completely decimated when by the Babylonians. that we had, from King Solomon's time to 5 million people, and the different wars and internal Jewish wars, and the to the Babylonian destruction down to almost 300,000 people. Crazy. And on the bottom you have the names of the famous people, the prophets, and then later the rabbis, till today famous people. So then, after the creation of the Second Temple, rededication of the Second Temple, here it's estimating at about 515, and that's Ezra, and that's basically the close of the prophets. That's the end of the Bible when the Second Temple gets rebuilt, and slowly the Jewish population picks up close to 5 million again when the Romans destroy us. And as I've said in my many lectures, the Romans really, they hit us hard. We went down to less than 1 million people. Probably the Romans killed, murdered over a million, maybe more of us, exiled possibly 1 million of us into slavery around the world, and slowly we start coming into Europe. So after the Roman expulsion, you have a small amount of people. The green starts coming in the Roman Empire at 70 AD. And you could see a handful, the green, of Jews that were probably either brought as slaves to Europe or went to Rome. The Christians, the early Christians, the New Testament talks about Jews all the way through Spain, but only a handful, tens of thousands. And that stays that way really throughout the whole, Middle Ages till about 1,000, 1,200, when you get tens of thousands, maybe more than hundreds of thousands of Jews that start, during the Crusades. So you have important numbers like 691, the Dome of the Rock after Muhammad is built in Jerusalem. 800, the Khazar conversion to Judaism. 1290 is the expulsion of Jews from England and France. And note the very small numbers. So you have like 190 expulsions of Jews across Europe, most of them occurring during the Middle Ages. And there's not too many Jews, like at most hundreds of thousands, tens of thousands. And a lot of those are reasonably well documented. And the next slide, I'll show some of that. And then you see around 1700, the huge population explosion of Jews, a lot of those in the Polish area. And we got to do more history. 1736, the establishment of Hasidic, pardon me, 1492, the expulsion from Spain. And when you see the expulsion from Spain, you'll start seeing a tiny number of Jews in South America. Can't even tell if you could see that purple on the top of the map there, into the Americas. And really, it's that Central Europe where you have that huge population explosion. So, if, for ancient Israel in the time of King Solomon, and the Romans, you had up to close to 5 million Jews. And according to this estimates, there's about 1 million Jews for the next 1700 years. And then about 1700, there's a huge population explosion of Jews from about 1 million to 15 million. And most of those occur in Central Europe. So, they estimated that, I'd said like 75% of all Jews are of Polish origin till today. And that could still largely be true. And, the amount of Jews that were in the Arab empires that came to Israel is significantly smaller than the amount of Jews that came through Europe. So I wanted to put that out there. The link to this is in the discussion. You want to come on to this, Babylon? And I'm going to do one more thing, and then I'm going to talk through the laws of Lashon Hara. So I'm glad there's some people watching this. I'm going to do this one other timeline, and then I'm going to, if people have questions, I'll open up to questions. And if someone wants to come on and, talk through some of this, we can. Then I'm going to go into the laws of Lashon Hara, if that's interesting also. Someone can come on to talk about that. So here's another timeline of, Jewish history. And, so we're talking, according, to most people, Adam and Eve, that's 3,761 years before the Common Era. And they even have it here that was October 7th, that we know exactly according to the biblical narrative. We have Rosh Hashanah every single year. And so we know the exact date according to the Bible when the world was created. And going down, this is all biblical stuff till the flood, and then if you know your Bible, these dates will Abraham is born in here it is 1813, and a lot of interesting information. People who know the Bible, a lot of stuff is happening. You're going through a few hundred years according to the Bible. People live longer at that time, and I'm not going to spend too much time in the link to this is in the chat. And we get to the modern period. Here's the Babylonian exile already, 538 before the Common Era, and you could see there's nice information. You hover the mouse over it, and things pop up. So I encourage people who are interested to read through this, and then you can see the rule of Rome, and till Muhammad and Islam. And you say that these are major events, and it'd be interesting. Like, I could read through all of them. I've studied so much Jewish history. I would probably know basically every single thing on this timeline. It might even have interesting things to comment. And maybe Babylonian Hebrew, who studied a lot of Jewish history, would also have things to comment on this. And people had questions on generic, like Judaism, Jewish rituals, halacha, and different things like that. So this history, I'm going to put up this. Here, people have heard of Yeshiva University. So this is in Manhattan in New York. It's one of the most famous schools in America, English language, and they have thousands and thousands of lectures. So here under categories, history, a period of Tanakh, Beit Sheni, the Second Temple, Roman period, 5th to 7th century, 8th to 10th century, 10th to 15th century, 16th to 18th century, 18th, 19th, 20th, 21st, personalities. Some of these have hundreds of lectures. So, Second Temple, Beit Sheni, Second Temple, and there's all sorts of lectures. I've listened to hundreds of hours of this, let alone the stuff on halacha and different things. And I'll put up another. Let me put this in the chat. YU.Torah. I've put that in the chat before, and I recommend recommend that. And I tell a story, but we have thousands of years of Jewish history, and I like Henry Abramson. I've been watching him for a few years now. His Jewish history as biography, and he's very interesting. He you see here his videos that Emma Lazarus, the one, the Statue of Liberty. This last semester he was talking about Sephardi Jews, and he usually does history through biography. And you can see most popular, who was Paul of Tarsus. Obviously Paul was a Jew, 121,000 views. Josephus, to all types at Rabbi Nachman, the Baal Shem Tov, and they're all like hour lectures. He has a PowerPoint presentations. And he also has more popular Jewish personalities that weren't necessarily rabbis. So even has like, who was Leon Trotsky, and they're all interesting. I've watched hundreds of these. I usually watch all of these when they come out. If people like that, they could see it. He tells some jokes. He's pretty popular. He's certainly more popular than me. I'm in correspondence with him, actually. He would know who I am. So let me see if there are any serious question. Post-liberal age, when did Jews stop stoning and why? It's questionable when the rabbinic law, like when did Jews stop having slaves? When did Jews stop implementing the death penalty? So according to the chart, some people held that up to 1000 AD that Jews were still trying to implement biblical law. And interesting, in Spain up until like the 12th or 13th century, there were periods of time where the Spanish royalty actually allowed the Jews to administer the death penalty. But that was probably the last time in history where the Jews were able to administer the death penalty rabbinically in medieval Europe, possibly in some Arab countries, like they had extreme Sharia law and had some sort of self-governance. But likely after the Second Temple was destroyed, that was the last time that Jews widely implemented the death penalty. And just how this relates, here's a page of Talmud. If let me just make sure I'm still streaming right. Yeah, I'm saying when we had Israel and we lived on and we had autonomous rule and we implemented our laws, the laws included the death penalty, which included the four different forms of the death penalty, including stoning. And so presumably that's the last time that we implemented the death penalty. Although, as I said, there were exceptions like medieval Spain, where you had a period. Here's a page of Talmud. At the beginning, it was a part of a Mishnah. At the very top, in the Mishnah is the laws written by Yehuda Nasi about 200 CE, and he's doing a compendium of the law from the Second Temple era, from like 500 years before him. If we looked at the Jewish history, it's a compendium of a bunch of different rabbis, and very interesting. A lot of the whole corpus of Jewish law is covered in it, and then the Gemara in the center is the commentary upon the Mishnah, and that covers the rabbis. There's two Talmuds of Israel and Babylon, of Babylon and Israel till about 600 AD, and then on the side, like on the outer edge, you see on the bottom corner, on the third outer edge, you might have what's called the Geonim, which would have been like 800 to 1000 AD. And the two ones on the side, you have Rashi and Tosfos, that were like in France and Germany, 11th, 12th century, and it's all commentating on the Maimonides is on the side. In the further commentary, there's books of commentary, so it's kind of historical. The rabbinic study goes around that. Here's like a Jewish law. This would be called the Mishnah Berurah, which hopefully maybe if I'm going to take Claire on and we're going to talk about the laws of the Lashon Hara. And you see at the top would be the Torah, which maybe was written like 800 years ago, and it was just an organization of Jewish law. Rav Yosef Karo organizes it, and he has the Sephardi customs, and then in between is the Ashkenazic understanding, and then commentaries on the side, and that's the corpus of Jewish law till today. This up here is like a Mishnah Berurah from actually the Frisch School, where Jared Kushner went to school. So it's a class on Jewish law from the Frisch School that Jared Kushner is alumni from. And so I'm going to take it off screen share, and I'll see if anyone has any questions. And if not, I'm going to invite Claire on, and we're going to talk about the laws of Lashon Hara. Claire, even God forbid throwing a gaze off a high building came from the Jews. Well, it came from Mosaic Abrahamic law. Basically, Sharia law is Abrahamic law. So the laws of Muhammad, the laws of Islam, is very close to the biblical laws of Israel. Judaism adapts generation after generation because Judaism has changed more than Islam. So in many ways, Islam is a more pure form of Abrahamic law than Judaism is. And I was a librarian at big shul in Brooklyn called the Emunah Yisrael, Rabbi Moshe Wolfson. He should be strong. You see the temple rebuilt in his lifetime. And we had lots of Hebrew books. A lot of these rabbis over the generation wrote whole shelves of books, commentaries on the Talmud, on halacha, on philosophy, on different issues. So, very interesting, very powerful stuff, and a little bit of a framework. So if there's not too many direct questions about, just random questions about Judaism or history, Jewish history that people want to throw out, I was thinking Claire was interested in talking about the laws of Lashon Hara. I just sent you the link in Twitter. If you see it, Claire, I just gave you the link in Twitter if you want to join on. And then in the link in the description below, also I have the overviews of the Lashon Hara. There's something called Halachapedia, which is like Wikipedia. So halacha literally means the way, the path, similar to like Sanatana Dharma, Dharma, or Tao, which means the way. So these laws of permitted speech, what can and what can't you say, are extremely important. They're useful to everybody, and it should improve people's life to know this, just to think about what should we say, what shouldn't we say, and having a positivistic view towards humanity. Okay, so let's see if Claire's coming down. I'm not really a story type person. Are you going to come on, Claire? Are you
Hello.
there?
Yes, I'm here. Can you hear me?
Yep, I hear you fine. So I got Claire on. I was on her show interest earlier. I'm more pure geek intellectual, and if there are any legitimate questions of interest, you see in the description the Torah.org, what I sent. You want me to DM it to you on Twitter, or do you have it from earlier, or can you pull it out of the description?
Oh, the one on Lashon Hara. I remember a few things from it from before. You're not even supposed to say things that are true.
Well, I thought we'd go through a text and just cover.
Okay.
I said I'm kind of a just the facts kind of guy, and I'm more. I don't know if it's boring, but I'm more academic on that. So I'm not sure. I guess post-liberal age is asking, what do I think of Moses Mendelssohn? I like Moses Mendelssohn. Some people say Moses Mendelssohn's the precursor of Reform. He was what you call a maskil, where he was basically Orthodox. He liked Jewish law. He thought Jews should keep Jewish law. He translated the Bible into German, but he held of the European Enlightenment in secular wisdom, as opposed to most of the Jews at his time had no interest in secular wisdom. They didn't care about the Enlightenment in the scientific revolution. And I might actually do a stream right after this on the Enlightenment and the scientific revolution in response to the JF's view. So personally, I like Mendelssohn. His son converts to Christianity, and his grandson is the famous composer that is like the Wedding March, or one of the famous musics that are around till today. And I think Immanuel Kant debated Mendelssohn. So Mendelssohn was a big figure. He had won an essay contest against Immanuel Kant. So those Enlightenment thinkers, he was part of their circles. They did, so to say, blood sports and debates. And but he's the precursor to Reform. So the positive Orthodox people like the Chassam Sofer, Rabbi Schreiber, who basically denounced any form of secular learning. And he said, once you start studying science and philosophy, next thing you know, you're going to dump the religion. And to some extent, he was right. And you're going to convert to Christianity. But I might paint Mendelssohn in a more positive light. And when Claire's ready, I might re-go into a screen share. And
I'm ready.
You have the thing I sent you?
Yeah, the speaking Lashon Hara when it's permissible. Is that the one you mean?
Yeah.
The
So
10-page thing.
Yeah. Watcher, are you watching? Do you want to read through this text that I have in the discussion on Jewish hate speech laws, like internal, not like ADL internet, but historically the biblical laws, what you're allowed to say, what you shouldn't say. It's very interesting. It's probably one of the most beneficial things you could learn from the Jewish tradition. But I know you're pretty intellectual, so if you're out there, content, and you want to join the conversation, I could even put the hangouts. Like, I don't know if I got trolls, but so I'm not sure if you're interested in coming on, content. If you want me to DM on Twitter to the professor account or something like that, and so I'm going to switch back over to screen share, and I'm going to show on the screen what we're reading from. And this is extremely beneficial. This is more my style, which is just the facts. Let's get some very useful information. First, this is the halachapedia that I put in there that has a quick overview if you want to read through it, and maybe And then I have the whole 17-page report. So, Claire, here we got speaking Lashon Hara when it's permissible, and here it's divided up into 17 sections where you're speaking hate speech to help others, the 7 conditions to satisfy before speaking hate speech. I'm just going to say Lashon Hara from now. Lashon Hara literally means bad language. Number 3, speakers with the same sins cannot speak. 4, constructive intentions. 5, causing rechilut is forbidden, and we'll discuss what actually is this rechilut, when even rechilut might be permitted. That's kind of like taunting. Rebuke for the transgressor first. When the speaker fears retaliation, a speaker is always righteous in his speech. An extra requirement for Lashon Hara regarding Bein Adam L'Makon, between man and the Creator. The affected party should not speak a Lashon Hara about things that weren't wrong when the affected party can achieve a constructive purpose. The 7 conditions, a detailed review. The 15, plan before speaking. 16, Lashon Hara as revenge. 17, identifying a culprit. So do you see the introduction, Claire? You want to read the introduction?
The last chapter of the section Hilkot Lashon Hara in Sefer Shabbat Chaim has 17 numbered paragraphs discussing situations when speaking Lashon Hara for a constructive purpose would be permitted. The second paragraph enumerates the 7 conditions required to speak Lashon Hara, something which may be worthwhile to commit to memory. Shall I continue?
Yeah, sorry, I just sent Babylonian Hebrew the link to if he wants to help the discussion. You could continue.
Speaking Lashon Hara to help others. If someone witnessed another person wronging his fellow, perhaps by theft or damage of property or injury, whether the wronged person is aware of the damage or theft or not, or by insulting or embarrassing him, and the witness knows that the offending party did not make amends, repaying the theft, repairing the damage, requesting forgiveness, etc., even if he was the sole witness, he may discuss the incident with others in order to help the guilty party, i.e., to repent and correct his ways, and also to publicly disparage such evil behavior. However, the witness should take extreme care that the 7 conditions that follow are met, to be enumerated in paragraph 2. Shall I read the 7 conditions?
No, so I wanted to comment on that is basically a person should be in the habit that we never say bad things about other people. We shouldn't just want to embarrass or tease or make other people feel bad. That's a serious sin. And, the Chavetz Chaim, the famous Rabbi Yisrael Kagan, who writes the book, he collects together like 17 different sins in the biblical verses that prohibit doing it. But there's certain cases where you're needed to say bad things about people for business reasons, for marriage, for association, for relationships where you Claire, as a friend, I just got to warn you that maybe you don't want to do business with that person because God forbid, they stole something from someone or you're going to date someone. And so that God forbid, you might not know, but the person's kind of a scumbag and they treated their last girlfriend extremely badly. And the purpose not to embarrass them or to cause bad things to the person, but just to warn the other party that they might be stepping into danger. So that's, they're saying, so generally a person should never do hate speech. There's no reason ever to do hate speech. And I'm just going to put the link in the chat. I hope I don't have any trolls. And, this is a pretty serious topic. So if anyone is seriously wanting to join in on this, what is hate speech? The link's just in the chat. And, so here we have 7 conditions before when can you say something bad to somebody. So never say anything bad just for the hell of it, just to make fun of someone or make someone feel bad. There's no exception. Never. That's always a sin. And we're not talking about government regulation or censorship because relatively, that's what I was talking about earlier with you on your stream about preventative law. This isn't preventative law. This is just what God's saying, what's a sin and what's not a sin. And it's not necessarily like we're going to do like preventative law. And even according to Torah, there weren't like lashes or punishment for hate speech. It was just a sin and you shouldn't do it. But it's saying, yeah, there is certain times where it's needed to say bad things about other people. And these are the 7 conditions. So if you want to read through the 7 conditions, please, Claire.
Number 1, the speaker must have witnessed the incident himself, rather than knowing about it from rumor. If he has only heard about the incident, then he must verify its authenticity firsthand. Number 2, the speaker should reflect thoroughly, not hastily concluding something is theft or damage or any other offense, that the action in question is truly a violation according to halacha. Number 3, the speaker should first approach the transgressor privately and rebuke him with gentle language, such as that the transgressor would be inclined to listen, because perhaps this can have an impact and inspire the person to improve his ways. If the transgressor does not listen, then the speaker should alert the public of the individual's guilt. In a case where the speaker knows in advance that the transgressor won't listen to rebuke, we will just discuss it.
That's Im Yeretz Hashem, with the help of God.
Oh, okay. In paragraph 7.
Inshallah.
Number 4, the description of the sin should not be exaggerated. Number 5, the speaker must have pure intentions. As we will discuss later in paragraph 4, the speaker should not, heaven forbid, enjoy his friends, the transgressors' disgrace, nor act out of a previous hatred he felt for the person. Number 6, if the purpose of speaking the Lashon Hara, for example, causing the sinner to repent, warning the community to stay away from such activity, can be achieved in another way rather than speaking Lashon Hara, it is forbidden to speak Lashon Hara. Number 7, by speaking Lashon Hara, the transgression should not be caused more damage than would be appropriate as determined by a court of Jewish law reviewing the case. This is discussed in detail in Hilchot Rekilut, chapter 9.
Any comments on that? This is pretty generic. Like, I think Islam would actually agree with it. That I've spoken to Islamic scholars and been at Islamic events, and they seemed in agreement that that's the exact same law according to Islam.
Oh, right. I didn't know the Muslims had their own rules. But yes, I suppose they would use yours as a kind of blueprint.
Well, the law is about rebuke, and I don't like the Hadith or the Quran exactly the source, but there is laws of rebuke in Islam, and that's pretty much the same.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, number 3. I guess I'll read this one. And this is saying, speakers with the same sin cannot speak. For any Christians listening to it, like hypocrites, don't in glass houses, shouldn't throw stones. Hypocrite, remove the plank from your own eye before you try to remove the plank from the other. So all this applies if the witness is a better person than the transgressor. If, however, the witness is just as bad a sinner, sick with the same immoral behavior, it is forbidden to publicize the incident. A person with similar sins does not have the intention of revealing the unknown out of goodwill and fear of God, but rather to enjoy the disgrace of his fellow. This is referred to in Hosea 1:4. And I have accounted for the sins of Jezreel upon the house of Jehu. Jehu fulfilled the mitzvah, the positive commandment, by cutting off the house of Ahab and Jezreel, for he was commanded by a prophet, and Jehu thereby was granted the kingship for 4 generations, as God told Jehu. And you have done to the house of Ahab according to that was in my heart. Your 4th generation shall sit on the throne of Israel. However, God similarly meted punishment upon the house of Jehu because he committed the transgression as Ahab once done. So in that instant in either Jezreel and Ahab, if the person publicized the sin of his fellow, but he personally was guilty of the sin, the same sin, then God will karmatically work it out so that he suffers the same punishment that his friend does. So, when we're talking about, sometimes it's necessary to warn the public of a person's bad deeds, just so that they should know that it's sinful activity, they shouldn't follow in it. And we went through the steps. First, you should be careful. You should make sure you're right about it. You should try to speak, to privately speak to the person before publicizing it, and so on and so on. And if you are necessary to publicize it, then you could only do that if you're free from that sin. And then it might talk about this later, but if, let's say you're also guilty of the sin, but it's necessary to publicize it for the public benefit, then you should ask, like a rabbi or more righteous person than you to do it. So go to your rabbi or righteous person in the community and be like, Rabbi, there's something horrible happening in the community, a con artist, or like a womanizer, God forbid, whatever negative thing the person is doing that the community needs to be warned about, and saying, I, as a sinner myself, I'm not capable of warning people. So, I'm passing the information along in the best interest of the community and in the best interest of the person themselves. That, a person who's spreading this Lashon Hara should have the best intention of the person that they're talking about. And because they know the gravity of sin, and that the person does not really want to engage in sin, and they're just doing it by mistake.
Mm-hmm.
Do you want to read number 4?
Yes. Constructive intentions. The fifth condition for speaking Lashon Hara, that one should have constructive intentions, is as follows. Proper intentions include any of the following. To help the wronged party. This is indicated by an audience which is capable of helping him. Certainly, if the people he tells can help the wrong party, it is proper to tell them. And even if that purpose won't be achieved, but he wants others to avoid evil ways when they learn that people criticize those who commit such sins. And perhaps the sinner himself will repent from his evil ways and make up for his actions when he hears that people disparage him for such behavior. Even in the third case, the speech would not be considered Lashon Hara, but rather constructive, so long as the speaker does not intend to enjoy the disgrace he puts upon his fellow. The speaker must speak out of a passion for the truth and hope that through his words some constructive purpose will result. If, however, the speaker realizes his words will not result in any constructive outcome, for example, the group he would tell are Baalei Lashon Hara, habitual speakers of Lashon Hara, such that they will indiscriminately repeat it, and that they have committed similar evils and thought nothing of it, one should be extremely careful not to speak to them. Not only will speaking to them provide no purpose, but it may also cause great damage. The listeners very likely will tell the guilty party what the speaker said, thus violating
You just read the
do
English.
not spread tales. As a result of such talk, great disputes often ensue, and possibly even, God forbid, a Jew reporting another Jew to non-Jewish authorities. Even if all other conditions are met, should there be the potential for malshinut, Lashon Hara may not be spoken.
Here's that malshinut is basically like being a traitor and saying, God forbid, this is applicable to everybody, and hope the non-Jews who are listening to this gain benefit. And this is written, maybe in internal Jewish communities, where it's saying that the person could, God forbid, report their comrade to the authorities, and the authorities will give a much stricter punishment than they deserve. Like maybe we were talking earlier on your channel about canings or beatings or even executions for crimes that, according to Jewish law, the punishment wasn't that big. And so if you indiscriminately start spreading hate speech to people and they repeat it to other authorities, then they might get a much more severe punishment than they deserve had they not spread that speech.
Yes, so it's like being a snitch.
Snitch is the right word. The malshinut is a snitch.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm saying that's why you have to. One of the reasons, and people might look at that negatively, like the duplicit Jewish standards, how you treat your fellow Jew or internal person in your community to the outsider. But that's just the example it's giving for people who want to understand it. So if you want to continue, if it makes no difference, or do you want to comment on that?
I can't, but it just occurs to me that would this idea of honor amongst thieves come under this
You could
idea?
look at it like that. I mean, here we're talking about Jewish ethnocentrism, but it
Mm-hmm.
could could be honor among thieves also. Like you don't want to be a.
Or with the sort of children not telling teacher,
Well, here's just giving an example of why you have to be very careful not to blab your mouth to people who don't care. I'm saying there's a purpose. You should never say hate speech for no reason. Just every word that comes out of our mouth, we should measure. But occasionally, we're required to say Lashon Hara because it's necessary for the community benefit. And like a lot of people, talk about shaming or different. How do you get people to change from their sinful, bad behavior? And in a way where you might know of someone's sinful bad behavior and it's negatively affecting the community, and you have a responsibility to warn the community. But even in that case, you have to be careful. You can't just blast things. And here, this might have been written a long time ago, like in Russia or something 100 years ago, where if it got to the authorities, the person could have been put in gulag for 50 years or something like that. So you're looking at the maybe in American society it wouldn't, where there's no punishment or just a little bit of embarrassment, it would have been the same. But maybe 100 years ago in Russia, for example, if these internal disputes got out and you weren't careful, and the next thing you know, someone snitches on you, the person's executed, God forbid, or something like that. So just saying, you have to be careful in when you're warning people about the person's behavior. If the people you're warning it to don't care about the negative behavior or even approve of the negative behavior, then you're not fulfilling any positive commandment by telling them of the other person's sins. It's only when it's a community of righteous people who generally follow these laws would it be beneficial to tell them this Lashon Hara.
Okay. It makes no difference whether the victim of the theft, embarrassment, etc. requested the speaker's involvement or not. For if getting involved is permissible, that would be even if the victim didn't ask. And if it is forbidden, if not all conditions were met, it would not help had the victim asked. Could you give an example of this thing, this paragraph I just read, David?
I mean, let's say, for example, someone's a thief and you're warning the other people that, this person is a thief. I'm sorry to tell you that this person, we all know, God forbid, they're a thief. They stole something. And so it's saying that it doesn't matter really the personalities involved. So if all the conditions are met, whether the victim asked you to do it or not, it may be it doesn't necessarily matter. So saying you should know that God forbid the person who had this stolen from them asked me to tell you, and say no, that doesn't matter. If you know the person stole it and you're trying to benefit and warn the community and encourage the person to repent and be a better person, you don't need to have the direct involvement of the people involved. That for these seven
Okay, I understand now.
conditions, if the 7 conditions to be met, it doesn't matter whether the victim requests you to be involved or not.
Okay, I understand.
And so maybe even if the victim requests you not to, God forbid, if the person, some sort of masochist or whatever, they don't want any publicity, and they don't want you to know that you might have to do it anyway. So it's like, I knew you personally forgave the person from stealing from you, and I'm not going to give your name necessarily that you're the person that was stolen from, but for the benefit of the community, people need to know that this person can't be trusted, even though you don't want to, you don't want personal involvement in that.
Okay.
And even God forbid, let's say if it was like a rape victim or something like that.
Oh, yes, I see.
If the rape victim forgave the persecutor, and you're saying like, oh, you don't have to warn other people because the victim forgave them, and be like, no, you still the victim's part in this has nothing to do with the laws of Lashon Hara.
Okay. Even if the victim is a relative, would be forbidden. Sorry, it's just this clause that doesn't become a sentence. Many falter in this area when people hear that someone harmed their family member, even though they haven't verified the information or gotten the details, they immediately take action against the other person. They think they are fulfilling the commandment, do not neglect your brethren. Yet they are making a grave error, for there is no distinction between a relative and everyone else regarding the laws discussed above, for the commandment was not meant to justify violating other commandments. Heaven forbid.
Okay. You got that?
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah, I mean, this is great stuff to me. Like, it's very useful. I've studied this, like I have whole books on this, and just to know and think about, and when you're a public personality, this is much more, like if you're a lawyer, a doctor, clergy, a politician, and you have access to privileged information, or in the army, or God forbid, think of like the FBI, CIA, criminal details, like besides just whatever small basis a person might know information. We have to conduct ourselves in our daily lives. As you said, Rabbi Mizrahi quoted the Talmud. The second temple was destroyed because of this. The Talmud said basically everybody is guilty of the speech of Lashon Hara. It is extremely difficult to guard our tongue. And as you increase in prominence, the more likely you become privileged to information that could harm others, and the more likely that you're privileged to information that you're required to give over for the benefit of the community. So it's extremely important to constantly review these laws and really grasp and understand them.
Yes.
And to some extent, community leadership, this might be the single most important feature for being a good community leader.
Mm-hmm. Or a good editor of a newspaper.
Yeah, any form. When you're an orator, when you're in front of people, when you're in front of a crowd, and even on this small circle, we got 12 people watching us right now, that maybe people start passing along. Did you know this about this person or this about that person? And kind of like the army, like need to know information. Do I need to know this information? Like Lashon Hara, I don't want to hear it. I have no interest in hearing you tell me bad things about this other person. Is there any benefit to me hearing this information? Is like, yes, because you're a leader, you have a YouTube show and there's 12 people watching and you need to warn your audience, or something like that. And you have to really understand these issues at hand. And, so I appreciate you, Claire, going through this with me. And I'm not sure if you're first time hearing this stuff.
I've heard a variation of this, but not in such detail. But it is fascinating to me, so I'm very happy.
Okay, so let's keep on going. Number 5, causing rechilat is forbidden, and I think rechilat is we're calling gossip. So here we just speaking Lashon Hara is included in the sins bein adam l'chavera, between man and his fellow man. And therefore, if the 7 conditions are met, it is permissible to publicize the lowliness of the gossiper. You were saying gossip is a sin, and if you know someone is a sinner in the sense that they gossip, they're what they call a bali Lashon Hara, they constantly say bad things about other people, then that too is something you could publicize. And like, I have to warn you, this person you're getting involved with, they're a gossiper, and if you tell them something, they're probably going to tell everybody. However, discussing the misdeed may only be done if the subject of the gossip is already aware of what was said about him. Otherwise, everyone has a friend. That's the Aramaic expression, like people talk, and someone will tell the subject, which is rechilat, actively spreading gossip, as we will discuss in the laws of gossip. It is certainly forbidden to inform the very person about whom Lashon Hara was spoken, even if one wants to do so out of passion for the truth. This is blatant rechilat, and even if the disgraced is a respected Jewish leader who happens to be the witness's father or teacher. You want to read number 6?
When even rechilut might be permitted. This paragraph continues the idea from the one before, that a witness to Lashon Hara may not repeat the incident unless the victim knows about the talk. In certain cases, it is permissible to tell others about a sin. That is, one person wrongs another, even if the victim is unaware of the offense. This is when speaking about it will result in an actual positive outcome, and also all the conditions above in paragraph 2 are met. Actual positive outcome requires definition so as not to cause misunderstanding. One example would be if one recognizes the nature of someone as a gossip monger, and he is embarrassing another person to his face and will similarly go to others and continue to denigrate him, And as we wrote above, the bystander must first attempt to rebuke the gossiper, and he has rebuked him, yet his words were not accepted. This situation is common among our many sins, for almost all of us falter with regard to Lashon Hara, and particularly accepting Lashon Hara. It is likely that people will accept this person's Lashon Hara, and it will be difficult to later remove his words from their hearts, because the first to speak out in an argument is believed to be right. Therefore, it is certainly proper that the bystander should go before these people first and elaborate upon the severe dishonesty of the gossip monger, and tell them how he is disparaging the subject without reason, about no wrongdoing whatsoever. Then, when the gossip monger later approaches the group and tells his tale, they will not believe what he says, but rather they will chastise him. When he sees that the audience does not believe in his words, and that his talk even brings embarrassment upon himself, he will be more careful in the future. For this purpose, it is certainly permissible, because the soul of the subject will be saved from anguish and embarrassment, and also the souls of gossiper and listeners will be saved from the curse of Gehinnom.
Oh.
Also, the mitzvah of rebuke your fellow will be fulfilled.
Awesome.
But please tell me what Gehinnom is.
Gehenna was hell. And
Gehenna.
Is that you, Babs?
Yes. Good evening.
Okay. Yeah, thanks for joining in. Quickly, I wanted to add in, it's a commandment to not believe Lashon Hara also. So, I mean, God forbid, just hypothetically, it's like, Claire, this guy Babs, gossip. It's a mitzvah for you to be like, Duvit, I don't believe you. I'm going to give Babs the benefit of the doubt. And unless you have some, reason or benefit, I'm just going to assume you're not telling the truth, because it's a mitzvah to judge people positively, unless the person's like a respectable person, or you have, the reason to be like, do you really know this to be true? Is there really a reason you're telling it to me? So here it's adding into that. So most people, it's very difficult not to believe gossip. And, maybe there's certain people, they're gossip mongers and all they do is tell lies. So you don't believe them, but sometimes people are half, or people are relatively good people and they might be repeating gossip and saying once those words, they might forget that they heard it. So you'd be like, oh, this person's a gossip monger and they just say bad things about everybody. But, that information, they don't remember where they heard it. So they hear the name is like, oh, I remember something bad about that person. And they forget maybe they heard it from bad, uncredible source, and it's already penetrated their heart. And so that's why these laws here are extremely important. And we're taking into account that, you should judge people positively. And even if, God forbid, we're in a den of liars and scorners, and they're just saying bad things about each other, that, should try to judge people positively and hope, I hope what you're saying is not true. I say that all the time. Like, people tell me something bad. It's like, I really hope what you're telling me is not true. And then, we haven't verified it and could be like, oh, I heard an unverified source and I cleaned it from my heart and I judged the person positively until I could verify it or verify that it was true or not true. So, most people aren't so scrupulous in this manner. And that's why, we went into so much detail. Are you familiar with these laws of Lashon Hara, Babs?
Of the concept of Lashon Hara, of course, yes.
But have you studied in detail? I mean, here, this is just a 10-page.
No, of course. I haven't studied in detail. I'm, a theological ignoramus.
Okay, you want to read number 7, rebuking the transgressor first? Is that big enough on your screen? Do you have the link?
Hold on. Yeah, sure.
Do you have the link?
Next, we will clarify what we wrote under the. Oh, it's gone. I can't read it off the link just because I'm on mobile right now. I up early. All right, next we will clarify what we wrote under the third condition in paragraph 2, that the witness must first rebuke the transgressor before speaking Lashon Hara about the incident or situation. This applies in general, but if the witness knows the individual will not listen to his words and will not accept his rebuke, he does not need to rebuke them. However, the speaker must be careful in front of at least 3 people if he were to speak to only 1 or 2 people. It would appear as if he does not want what he says to get back to the subject, that he wants to flatter the subject and deceive him and insult him in secret. It would also appear that the speaker was enjoying telling the Lashon Hara. In addition, the listeners would be suspicious of the speaker, and say that the information is untrue and that the speaker is deceiving them. For otherwise, he would not first discuss the issue he would not discuss the issue with the subject directly. If this would happen, his Lashon Hara would not achieve any constructive purpose as stipulated in paragraph 4. Therefore, one must speak this Lashon Hara publicly before 3 individuals before this is considered equivalent to speaking in front of the subject, and the listeners will not suspect him. Because an Adam Kasher, generally law-abiding individual, does not speak complete lies to a large group. Nonetheless, the listeners are forbidden to accept the Lashon Hara and allow the subject to be disgraced in their eyes. As we explained in chapter 6, even if the information isn't absolutely false, there may be extenuating circumstances or an unknown detail which sheds an entirely different light on the matter. Therefore, it is forbidden for them to conclude that the information indicates something negative about the subject, yet they may listen to it so that they may investigate it further, and if it is true, then rebuke the subject, and he might heed their words, as well as the other constructive purposes discussed above in paragraph 4, which you already covered.
Yeah, I mean, this is pretty technical, and we say in the halacha, in Jewish law, there's a lot of, it states like generally if something happens in front of 2 or 3 people, it's like everybody knows it. And so if you don't have a chance to rebuke somebody and you say, if it happens in front of 3 people, you could assume that people talk, or like eventually everyone will know it, everybody will hear it. And so, this is semi-technical. And if you think about, communication, social theory, you might think the sages had a lot of wisdom in that matter. And just the carefulness of, thing. Lashon Hara is an extreme sin. And I don't want to have that sin upon me. And just listening and accepting Lashon Hara is an extreme sin. And, so you're put in a situation, what do? I'm hearing these bad things about this other person. Should I believe it or not? Do I have a duty to act on this information to prevent the harm of other people? So it's pretty important to really understand this stuff. I guess I'll read number 8. When the speaker fears retaliation, all this applies if the witness is not afraid of retaliation by the subject, but if one does fear such consequences, it is permissible to be lenient and speak to another about the incident, even if in front of fewer than 3 people. So it's saying this idea of publicly rebuking the person, of giving over that this person is doing things that could be harmful to the community, should generally be spoken in front of 3 people. But if you're scared that if you speak in front of 3 people, the guy's going to beat you up or try to cause harm for you for doing it, you could just tell it to one other person and hope that that one other person will do something with that information. But in terms, have you fulfilled your obligation? You're saying you knew this guy was doing something bad, and you had an obligation to prevent, and you tried to rebuke him. You spoke to him and told him, don't do that. He kept on doing it. You had an obligation to warn the public, and that warning means telling at least 3 people and saying, but if you're really scared, so at least tell one person. And then someone want to read number 9?
A speaker who is always righteous in his speech. If the speaker is publicly recognized as one who does not shame another, and anything he says about someone who is not present, he would also say if that person is present, and he is also known as someone who only speaks the truth, it is permissible for him to relate an incident or transgression that someone has committed against his fellow, provided that the speaker knows that the subject will not accept his words of rebuke, even before fewer than 3 people, because the listeners will not suspect him of deception or disgracing others. Rather, they will recognize him as one pursuing the truth, helping the fallen, and publicly declaiming evil deeds. However, in this case, as well as in paragraph 8, all the conditions listed at the beginning of this chapter must be met, except for first rebuking the subject or relating the incident publicly. My goodness, it sounds like a legal textbook.
It is, and I'm saying this, so like your theoretical righteous person that is basically beyond reproach. He has to still follow the 7 conditions, but he doesn't have to follow these rules about in front of 3 people or publicly in those type rules. Those would not apply. So you want to read number 10, Babs?
Yes, I would. Both speaking Lashon Hara about someone who commits a sin, Bein Adam Lachaver, Lachero,
L'chavero.
between
It's missing a R for
Lachavero.
some reason.
Oh, I see. Sorry. Yeah. Between man and his fellow. For example, helping the poor, or one who commits a sin, Bain Adam Lamakom, between man and God. For instance, observing Shabbat are treated equally, with one exception. For sins between man and God, it is not permissible to talk about the person, even if all conditions in paragraph 2 are met, unless the speaker sees that the individual has intentionally and eagerly committed this sin numerous times, and also that the action is commonly known to be prohibited. For further detail, see chapter 4, halacha 7.
Yeah, so that's okay. Generally the Jewish law is divided into laws between man and his fellow man and laws between man and God. So if a person is committing sins between man and God, that's not really necessary to go and tell everyone about. Like, does he keep kosher? Does he eat Sabbath? Does he put on tefillin? Does he wear tzitzis? Does he do, all these different personal things? That's usually much less needed to warn the public about. Sometimes like Sabbath observance or kosher observance, but it's as opposed to a person that's wronging his fellow person, that's usually much more likely to be in need of warning other people about. So you just like stop talking like, Babs, did you put on tefillin today? Saying, what does that matter? What does that matter to anybody? Does anybody need to know whether you put on tefillin today or not? As opposed to, like, are you nice to the poor or something like that? That's more applicable knowledge for people that might need to know. Do you want to read 11, Claire?
The affected party should not speak. How much must one beware not to permit himself to speak Lashon Hara about a situation in which he was personally harmed, either monetarily or in terms of his honor? Even if he knows that what he says is true and all the other conditions are in place, there is no way that his intentions will be completely constructive. While proper intentions would be to denounce evildoers and thereby encourage others to avoid such behavior, or perhaps that the sinner himself should see others disparaging him on account of his actions, and he would therefore be inspired to repent from his evil ways, he would only want to disgrace the individual because of the wrong that was done to him. And the more that his audience would seem to believe his story, the happier he would be.
Yep. It's pretty clear. Usually say if you're the one who's been wronged, it's better that an independent party be the one warning the public for multiple reasons, as mentioned. Any comments on that?
That seems fair enough.
Okay, I'll read number 12. Lashon Hara about things that weren't wrong. All the more improper is discussing an incident in which the subject didn't even wrong the speaker, but merely did not do the speaker an expected or appropriate good deed, like lending him money, giving him charity, inviting him as a guest. If he were to tell others in order to disgrace the thoughtless individual, he would be in blatant violation of the laws against speaking Lashon Hara. To our great disgrace, many err in this matter. If one is not received by someone according to his desires, when he gets to the next town, he disparages the leaders of the previous town because they did not help him to the extent that he expected. It is even worse when he speaks badly about the entire town because Lashon Hara is forbidden, even if it is true, and about one person. How much more worse when the Lashon Hara is about an entire town of Israel clinging to their belief in God, what is a grievous sin. An extremely important thing to note in here, Lashon Hara is forbidden even if it's true. It's not, Lashon Hara doesn't mean lies and gossip that's false. Lashon Hara could also be something that's true. And like if it's God forbid, Duvid didn't want to let me on his show. Or like I DM'd Duvid and it's like, will you, or something, you're like, I asked him to borrow money. And even if it's true, it doesn't matter. It's hate speech and it shouldn't be said unless there's a pertinent reason. And sometimes there is a reason, like you have beggars and people that are saying like, will this man help me out or not? And it's like, okay, I asked Duvid for help and he gave me $1 and he gave me $20. I asked this guy for help. He gave me, he didn't give me. And if it's applicable to the person, but just generally, like, you should know this person is not a nice person, and I know because I asked him for a favor and he said no. Right? Any comment on that?
No. Well, I haven't.
Okay. You still there, Babs? You want to read number 13? Looks like Babs was lost. You want to read 13 then, Claire?
When the affected party can achieve a constructive purpose. Even so, it appears to me that if one evaluates that if he tells others what a horrible injustice another has done to him, they could then help him to recover stolen money, for example, that he may speak to them and ask their assistance. In some situations, a constructive purpose may be achieved even if not in financial matters, but rather oppression or embarrassment and the like. For example, if he knows for certain the manner in which an individual plans to embarrass him regarding a certain subject or situation, and he tells some important people or relatives to the subject and explains the truth of the situation, and they see for themselves that the speaker is right, perhaps they will prevent the individual from causing trouble. Even if the incident already took place and the speaker has already been shamed, oppressed, etc., if he recognizes that by not telling an authoritative figure or relative of the individual, then the individual will harm him further, he may tell them to prevent it. In all of these such cases, even if the subject will be embarrassed by the discussion, the speaker may tell selected individuals who may help the situation, provided that his own intentions are to protect himself from financial or other harm. This sounds a bit complicated. Do you think you could give us an example?
Yeah, I mean, God forbid, that's why I told you, like, the abuse of, like, the rape victim, or maybe the spousal abuse or something like that, where, if God forbid, there's a husband and wife, and the husband's beating his wife, and, she doesn't want people to know because it's embarrassing, but like, he's not going to stop. He's just going to keep on doing it more and more unless you intervene and make an intervention. That and maybe she even begged you. He's like, please don't tell anyone. I really don't want people to know. This is really embarrassing. Like, I know he's going to get better. He's going to stop. But you say, like, no, it's not happening. It's getting worse and worse. That even though the person begged you, don't tell, that you still have an obligation to tell the person, but it's a constructive purpose, and you have to know your intention is for the best interest of the person, and you're realizing the factor that, yes, there will be certain embarrassment or damages to the person for this information getting out, and be very careful who you tell. If it's possible that only one person could know, maybe the example I gave about spousal abuse, that you could tell one person, and that one person would be able to make an intervention, and nobody besides that one person that you told would ever know about it, and the situation could be contained.
Okay.
Okay, it's pretty interesting. So now I think we're number 14, the 7 conditions, a detailed review. One must be very careful when using this permission that none of the 7 conditions mentioned at the beginning of the chapter are lacking, because if one does not use great caution, he may easily be caught in the snare of his evil inclination, and because one of habitual speakers of Lashon Hara. For this reason, this paragraph will elaborate on each of the conditions, provided that the speaker knows that his friend is not yet repented from the transgression, and the speaker has a constructive intention. As we have discussed, he may speak about the person, provided that all the conditions are met. Condition 1, first-hand knowledge of the incident. The speaker must have witnessed the incident himself, not repeating what he heard from others, for even if the speaker was truly harmed, he doesn't know that the person in question did damage. And there might be a little more detail, like if someone else told you about it but told you, I can't tell people for whatever reason. But usually, no, I mean, it's not, you can't hand over, hearsay, secondhand knowledge. You only have an obligation to say something when you directly witnessed it. You want to read, condition 2 and 3?
Okay. Condition 2, a violation according to Jewish law. The speaker should not hastily conclude that the action is an actual case of theft, injury, emotional torment, defamation, etc. Rather, he must first consider, according to the guidelines of the Torah, whether a judgment would be with him and that the other person is a thief, injurer, defamer, etc. This condition is generally more difficult than all the others because there is no person who sees himself as at fault. Everyone sees himself as righteous and just. If someone errs in this regard, he is considered Motzi Shem Ra, one who spreads false rumors about another, which is a more severe prohibition than speaking Lashon Hara. Condition 3.
Just
Rebuke
a
the
note on that. Lashon Hara refers to truth or lie. It's Lashon Hara whether you're telling the truth or whether you're lying. Motzi Shemra specifically refers to spreading false rumors, as opposed to Lashon Hara could refer to spreading false rumors or to spreading the truth when it harms someone.
I see. Condition 3. Rebuke the subject first. If the speaker thinks that if he discusses a matter with the offending party directly, there will be a positive outcome, he must speak with him before publicizing the issue to others.
Okay. Condition 4, entirely true information. The speaker should be most cautious that the story is true without any introduction of falsehood and no exaggeration beyond the facts. Also, he should not leave out any detail that could be interpreted as a defense for the other person, even though it doesn't vindicate the subject. If the listener would know about this favorable piece of information, the subject wouldn't be as disparaged before them. And when the speaker leaves the information out, the subject is very disgraced before those hearing it. It would be a great violation to leave it out. The guideline is not to describe the offense as worse than it was, for if one does, he is speaking Lashon Hara and violates several prohibitions discussed above in the introduction. You want to read number 5?
Condition 5. Constructive intentions. That he should have constructive intentions is the principle upon which the permissibility of his speech is based, as discussed in paragraph 13.
Condition 6, no other way to achieve the goal. If he can achieve the purpose through other means, such that he does not need to speak about the subject, it is forbidden for him to relate the information. Even if he must tell the information, yet he can downplay the offense so the subject is not disgraced as much before the listeners, and the purpose that he hopes will come out of his informing others will not be diminished. It is a mitzvah to downplay it and to not expose the full extent of his crimes to the listeners, since even in this manner the speaker will achieve the goal. Condition 7.
Not more than halakhic punishment. That the subject should not be damaged by the Lashon Hara to a greater extent than a judgment against him would extract, were witnesses to testify on the matter in a Jewish court.
Okay, and 15, finishing up here. Plan before speaking. Now see, dear reader, how carefully one must evaluate a situation before talking about it. For at the moment that he speaks, he is in grave danger of transgressing the laws of Lashon Hara. If he does not guard himself with regard to all the conditions, and in particular to the second and the fourth, you see the second condition was that it has to actually, be harm. He has to really know that the person made a violation. And the fourth condition, that it's true, that he's really telling the truth, so that the person really has to know, all 7 conditions. But the second and fourth condition, that that there really was a damage done, and that what information he's handing over is true, the truth and nothing but the truth. So in this regard, we say life and death are in the power of the tongue. If one does not think before he starts speaking about an issue and consider how to divulge the information, he will certainly falter, heaven forbid, because when he does communicate the matter, his anger will get the better of him and incite him to say more than he should. Therefore, one must firmly impress upon his soul instructions as to how to let the information out of his mouth before he begins to speak. This is in order that the speaker will not overstate the other person's transgression, and also so that he will maintain constructive intentions as we discussed above. Do you want to do 16, revenge?
From all we have written, we can see the enormousness of error in which people fall into constantly. If someone thinks that another is speaking Lashon Hara against and disparaging his friend, when he confronts a person, why are you speaking Lashon Hara about him? The person will immediately reply, because he spoke against me to whoever and whoever. This is a big mistake for several reasons. One, well, someone told him it is forbidden to believe because of the prohibition against accepting Rekhilot. And gossip. And as we have written in several places, how could it be permissible to go and speak against him because of this? Two, even if it were true that the other person spoke against him, it is prohibited because of the prohibition against taking revenge to therefore go and speak Lashon Hara against him, and also, as we have written in paragraph 14 above, regarding the requirement to speak with constructive intentions.
Okay, and the last one, number 17, identifying a culprit. If something improper occurs and Ruvain approaches Shimon and asks who did this, even if it is clear that Ruvain suspects Shimon, Shimon may not say who is guilty, even if he witnessed it himself. Instead, he should reply, I didn't, unless this is a kind of incident, even if he weren't asked, and even if there was no suspicion against him at all, that he should tell Ruvain in any case, such as something between man and his fellow man, and all the other conditions of this chapter are met, or something between man and God, and all the conditions are met for that. And then Shimon may tell Ruvain about it, not implicating someone else, and is according to the minimum expectations of the law. It is appropriate for spiritually minded individuals to go beyond the expectation and not exclude themselves from suspicion when that may result in the implication and subsequent embarrassment of someone else. So just in the exact situation where you're there and something bad happens and someone comes by and is like, what happened? Even just thinking it wasn't me.
Mm-hmm.
So further, we find in Sanhedrin 11 stories of several sages who accepted blame upon themselves in order that the real sinner not be exposed. And also in Sefer Chassidim, if one is in a group of people and something improper is done and no one knows who did it, he should say, I'm the one who sinned, even though he didn't. So just ending with the extreme high levels of service of God, where you're saying, like, you're not even going to try to defend yourself and say it wasn't me, just to say, let alone you're going to say it was him, but you're not even going to get up there and say you don't even need to say, like, it wasn't me. So
Gosh.
So I hope this was useful to you. I hope you enjoyed this, Claire. I wanted to get this information out there, like just put useful information on my YouTube page for anyone who's following me or part of my page regularly. And for myself, I've studied this information in the past many times. I have huge books on it. A lot of times people would ask rabbis on questions if it came up and you're unclear, like, what should I do? I saw something bad happen. I'm not sure. Do I have an obligation to let people know, or can I just let it pass? Or there's a little art to rebuke and privately telling people. And actually, it's a mitzvah commandment to rebuke people. And to some rabbis have said rebuke is the hardest of all the commandments. That it's extremely difficult. And as we said also, that you could only you fulfill this when you're free from the sin you're warning other people about. Like God forbid, the famous example when the person goes into the house of ill repute and he sees someone else from his synagogue in the house of ill repute, and there's kind of like a camaraderie among sinners, because, like, well, if you telling me, the only way that you could tell on me is self-implicating yourself. So this world we live in, where righteous people are very few and almost everyone is a sinner, so you have to first clean yourself so that you could say, I know this isn't the way to live. There's a better way to live. I'm not trying to cause harm to people. I'm trying to enlighten society. And, so first we have to purify ourselves. And as we purify ourselves, we'll be able to rebuke people and clearly show them that, there's a better way to live. It doesn't pay to be a gossip monger. It doesn't pay to hurt people's feelings. And even spreading the truth doesn't justify hurting people's feelings unless there's clear reason why it's necessary for people to know this information.
Uh-huh.
Do you have anything you want to add?
No. It's obviously something that needs to be remembered and applied, and I guess most people are at some point in their day guilty of it. Would you say?
Yeah, I'm saying the Talmud said everybody's guilty of the sin of Lashon Hara.
So, especially when you discuss politics, I think, probably.
Yeah, and saying, I mean, you're discussing public personalities and like U.S. law. There's exceptions like for speech when it's about a public personality for slander, and also slander. I think maybe according to U.S. law, slander has to be negative, and you could even slander public personalities, but legally, like you could speak about people that are already in the public light. And I'm not sure if you're familiar with those laws.
Yes, I am aware of the law of defamation, but slander is verbal and libel is published, and yeah. So I guess our the media must be really over their heads in Lashon Hara, and I suppose they will boil in hell forever.
Well, I mean, we didn't say the punishment, but whether people are rewarded for their good deeds and punished for their bad or their purgatory. But say it's a sin. Society would be better without it. The first step is to purify ourselves. And if you could, cling to righteous people, and you recognize one way to recognize righteous people is how they guard their tongue. That you see that this person is extremely careful with how they talk. They don't like to, I had the class that I went over ethics of the father, very good stuff, and saying my desire is to bring peace between man and his fellow man, to bring harmony to the world, and negative energy usually doesn't help. It's very rare where it's necessary to rebuke people, and it's rare where it's necessary to spread negative, bad information. There is cases where you have to rebuke people. Rebuking people is a commandment. Many times, people may not know they were wrong. They might, not have been trained any better. They might just be following how their parents and family and different people treated them, and they're just thinking, well, this is how people treated me, so that's how I'm treating other people. Saying, no, there's a better way to live. We should learn these laws, try to ascribe to them, and rebuke doesn't always have to be negative. You just be like, I'm here, I'm trying to help you, I'm trying to show you that there's a better way, and you should just know that you're making a mistake. And a lot of times people become friendly to rebuke. They'll say, thank you, I appreciate you telling me that.
Mm-hmm. Mm.
Yes. I mean, right?
Yes, that was very useful, thank you.
Yeah, no, I didn't personally rebuke it at all. We just were covering the laws that are mutually beneficial. But I say, if you did know people that are gossip mongers or something, to say like, it's not good to be a gossip monger. It's not good for you yourself. Besides the people that you're hurting yourself by doing it. And the person might snap at you. They might cost you a friendship or something, and you have to be careful with that. And but they might later come and thank you for it. Or if it's community wise, where you literally have to provide a benefit to the community and say like, this is not the type of community we're trying to create, and you should just know that I would like this person, I want them to become better, but they're not careful in these laws, and you can't really trust what they say. They just go around saying bad things about people, and there's not even any truth to what they're saying. Okay, anything else you want to talk about? It looks like the chat got into these random topics about World War II and German theology, Himmler, Bhagavad Gita. This is actually interesting to me. Like I know, I'm not sure if any of you in the chat want to come on and talk about that. I've looked into like Himmler and the Bhagavad Gita and Nazi Germany. I don't know exactly, why, if the chat's even listening to what we're talking about, or they just have it on mute and are just chatting about this in the chat. Sometimes it's hard to tell.
It's hard to tell. I know.
Yeah, I know a lot of people don't actually listen to the video, and and why they're in my chat, and like I got to try to come up with like some karmatic reason. I publicly advertise this, and I'm putting this out there to benefit people. And these topics do actually interest me that they're talking about in the chat, but.
But I think it might have been a bit complicated. I mean, it's just that there's long sentences that we have to read. I mean, it must have been quite difficult for people to grasp.
Well, it's legalistic, but it's saying it's important to know that, and a lot of times, you just know that be careful. I'm careful about what I say. I think about it. Always think about what you say before you say it, or have done your research, especially when you're saying something that could hurt people or harm people. And you have any expertise on Hinduism, World War II?
Not me personally, but a few people seem to be quite interested.
I have some. I actually have. I mean, if you want to sign out, you can, or if you want to stay on.
Yeah, I think I might sign out because it's getting late and I'm getting a bit tired. So I'll do that, and maybe I'll just sort of listen to it in bed. But thank you, David, and I will chat to you anon.
Okay. Yeah. Thanks for joining
Okay.
me. Have a great
Bye.
night. Be in touch.
Good night.
Okay. I guess if anyone in the chat is still listening, I have this book, on Savriti Devi. I know she's an interesting figure in. I'm going to unplug my earphone, so I'm just talking into the mic. I'll show you some books on the topic that I have, and so I have Savrita Devi's collected writings also, and I mean, I have basic book on Himmler. People have studied this. People are interesting. Here is Himmler, architect of genocide. Here's new religions and the Nazis. Interesting their belief system. I actually have a lot of stuff on Jehovah's Witness in World War II, and yeah, so I have looked into it. It's a very interesting topic. Himmler, was he a Hindu? I'm not sure. The Germans were the first European society to be interested in the Vedic literature, and they're the first society to translate the Bhagavad Gita. The Bhagavad Gita was translated, I think, into German in around 1700. It wasn't translated to English till like close to the end of the 18th century. People like Thomas Jefferson and Benjamin Franklin had read the Bhagavad Gita. It was in English at the time of the founding of America. Prabhupada, people like the Hare Krishna movement, Schulze, I forget the name. One of Prabhupada, there was a German man who had joined the Gaudi Math, who had been put in prison by the British for being German citizenship, and Prabhupada's godbrother had went to Germany, and he had met with Himmler. He had met with Bose, the founder of the Indian National Army. Some people held that Hitler was the avatar of Krishna, the verse that says Krishna comes back every generation to restore truth. And there's that famous book by Trimundi that still hasn't been translated into English from German. If any of you know German, the Krishna Buddha, Hitler, Krishna Buddha, the Unholy Alliance. It's extremely interesting, although it's still not available in English. So there is quite a, Hitler was a vegetarian. There's a lot to the Hindu connection of World War II. And, God forbid, I've heard even from some like Hindu fundamentalists that, World War II and, Europe was punishment for killing the cow. And God forbid that the Jews who provided the moral justification to the West through the Bible that justifies killing the cow, because largely, who gives you the right to kill the cow? And that it was the Bible, the Jewish Bible, that's largely the moral justification for killing the cow, and that Hitler is a vegetarian. So there's a lot of crazy conspiracy theories, and I know Savrita Davies became very popular these days in the alt-right and European nationalism. I could put the link in the chat if any of you want to come on and talk about this. I'm not sure if there's any other Ask the Rabbi questions, or people want to go into like World War II and talking, like the swastika. Have any of you seen? Let me get up here the Theosophic symbol. I'm going to put up a screen share. And people maybe are familiar with like Madame Blavatsky and Theosophy. I think I was actually talking about that earlier, and I'm going to do a screen share and show this. So, Madame Blavatsky had the Theosophical Society, and you have your like cross, the Egyptian like Ankh thing in center, like the cross with the circle, the Star of David, the circle around with the serpent, and atop the swastika, and then like the Om sign, and I'm not sure if that one's like a pi sign or another Hindu. There's no religion higher than truth. This was the seal of Theosophy, and it actually predates. I think it was already like in the 1880s or something, so that you have the swastika resting on top of the Star of David. And this was actually before, the state of Israel in the 1880s. I'm not sure if any of you have seen that before or have any comment on it. It's pretty mind-boggling, the connections. I'm just reading the chat if anyone had ever seen that Theosophical sign. And like, let me pull a few books out. So there's still 10 people watching. This is actually something I've studied, and it's very interesting to me. I'm coming back. I'm just pulling a book off my shelf. I'm looking for a second book. I'll come back and try to find it. If this book is interesting. It was kind of expensive. I ordered it. Subhas Chandra Bose in Nazi Germany, and Prabhupada, who started the Hare Krishna movement, went to school with Subhas Chandra Bose. He was childhood friends, and Subhas Chandra Bose was an Indian politician, and he lost to Gandhi in elections, and he goes off and to Nazi Germany, and he meets with Hitler, he meets with Himmler, he meets with his leaders, and he forms the deal for founding the Indian National Army, where I think Rommel was fighting the British troops in North Africa, and he worked out a deal that the Indian troops who were fighting for the British in North Africa, if they would surrender to Rommel, that Rommel would turn the troops back over to India, and through that he founded the Indian National Army. And actually, the Axis, recognized a free and independent India in 1941. I have books that have pictures of that meeting, and so it's interesting. Like a lot of Nazi figures and even Hitler are revered in India and China among the Axis countries because, to some extent, they claim to have tried to liberate India. And so in 1941 already, India recognizes a free and independent and Hindu India. And I'm not sure if anyone in the chat is familiar with this research. So there's a lot to it. If you speak to Hindu nationalists, saying the British was their real enemy. So the enemy of your enemy is your friend. And so in that way that in India at the time, Britain was the enemy. Britain was running India. They were plundering, stealing the land, colonizing. It was a horrible occasion. And Gandhi basically wanted to work out a deal with the British for the British to peacefully give back power to the Indians. And Bose were like, "What are you talking about? You can't give back what you stole. The British stole India. They have no legitimate right to the property. They can't give back something that they stole." So they allied with Nazi Germany, and Nazi Germany were allies with elements of India, and they even recognized Bose as the leader of India and recognized a free and independent India separate than the British colonial state. So there is quite a bit to it. And Bose, interesting. He writes he didn't mind Jews. He writes that he saw the Holocaust happening and bad things were happening to the Jews, and he felt bad for the Jews, but he wanted to do what was best for India. And at that point, unfortunately, relatively, the Jews were partially implicated in the colonialization of India. For example, Benjamin Disraeli was very influential in the colonization of India. I forget the name, like if it was Queen Catherine or whoever it was. Disraeli declares her Empress of India, and then they use Jews like the Sassoon family and Iraqi, Baghdadi Jews, Indian Jews as like a divide and conquer strategy. So one of the tools that the British used to colonize India was the minorities in India, such as Jews. And so it's a lot of interesting information. I think it was Ban Maharaj. If people know the Hare Krishna movement, and Prabhupada's god brother was Ban Maharaj, and then I forget the Shivananda or whatever, the German disciple Schulze, who Ban Maharaj had recruited. And actually, Ban Maharaj recruits a Jew in New York, but he goes to England, but he does very well in Germany. Probably he was received the best in Nazi Germany, and he almost met Hitler. They give story that he had been in waiting, and Hitler had been pacing outside, but he didn't have a chance to meet him. And he goes back to India, and he goes back to Prabhupada's guru and ask him about going back to Germany. But the Germans had understood the Hindu Bhagavad Gita as a caste type system and opposed intermarriage. So according to Gaudiya Mouth, Prabhupada, the Hare Krishna, they were overturning caste, and they said there's no such thing as caste. Anybody could become a Brahmin, and it was okay to intermarry. Yeah, Victoria, who put that, Benjamin Disraeli had declared Victoria Empress of India, which I think relatively it was easy for this Jewish Prime Minister of Britain to say Queen Victoria is Empress over all the hundreds of millions of people living in India, and to pillage their wealth and do horrible things to those people. So to some extent, you will find anti-Semitism among Hindus and Indians who didn't have too much mercy for what was happening to the Jews in Europe, because they looked at the Jews as supporting the colonization and plunder of Europe. So these really the Hinduism enlightened my view on world Jewry and world affairs, trying to recognize that the Nazis in India were allies, and the position, because India is generally a philo-Semitic country. India is the only country that has never persecuted the Jews. India is very nice to the Jews. Jews have always found refuge in India, and so on and so on. But yet at the same time that the Nazis were willing to recognize a free and independent India, and a lot of Jews were complicit in the colonization and profiting off of the plunder of India. There's a lot of research into this. It's interesting that people are asking me about this. I mean, it's Ask the Rabbi, and this is, it's a legitimate Jewish history. It's important to know, and people really want to know the truth. What happened in World War II? Saying it really was World War II. If you look and say, like, there were deaths and battles and skirmishes literally everywhere in the globe. So obviously, of the 60 million people who died, the majority of that was like in China and in Europe. Although there was battles, like I was saying, Rommel was fighting the British in North Africa. Even in South America, there were skirmishes and deaths and fighting, and America got involved. And basically, by the end of the war, every country was involved. So, I appreciate if anyone has some scholarship on that. I'm interested in learning more. I'll put in the link to this book that that I hope someone translates into English. I'll do a screen share for this one. Yep. Put in the link. And I'll do a screen share because I mean, if someone could improve my scholarship on this, I've basically reached the limits of what's available in the English language. I'm constantly buying the books on it. So here's this book by Victor Treimandi, Hitler, Krishna, Hitler, Buddha, Krishna, Een Hunlige Alliance van Dritten Reich bis Hot, which Hitler, Buddha, and Krishna, the unholy alliance between the Third Reich and Hot, India. Or when you say it's expensive too, like here it's the new copy is $130, so might be out of print. I hope someone translates that into English. If there's someone who is watching my channel who reads German and could get a hold of that book and has read it and is able to say over, make a presentation on some of that, it's extremely interesting. And there's a lot of research left on World War II, like what China and Indian alliances. I'd showed that other man the book on the different nations that sent troops to fight for the Nazis in like Afghanistan, Iraq, Chinese. There are all types of the allies included like 20 different nations. I mean, the Axis included like 20 different nations. So post-liberal age, why doesn't the alt-right like Western tradition? I'm not sure you mean the alt-right or Jews. Presumably the alt-right is based on Western tradition. It's a revival, or at least a parts of Western tradition. And possibly if the alt-right you're talking about white nationalists, they have, I'm not sure this is such a ask the rabbi or Jewish question, but they're trying to separate a Judeo-Christian tradition from a European tradition, which might be impossible to do. So I mean, that's not really a ask the rabbi question. So not sure if there's any question. Daystar, there's a connection between Theosophy and most religious groups. The Nazis were interested in ideas. Why wouldn't they be interested in Theosophy? Well, Theosophy is from Madame Blavatsky, who flees Russia and comes to England. So, presumably, she died. She's like in the late 1800s, early 1900s. She had met with Albert Pike. She's the one actually who turned. Gandhi writes about Madame Blavatsky in his autobiography. He was a legal student in England, and he went to the Theosophic Center, and Madame Blavatsky was actually the one who told Gandhi he should study Bhagavad Gita. Germany was also very interested. Really, all of Europe was very interested in the Vedic and Hindu theology for a long period of time, and the rise of Nazi theology and occult theology, and possibly even till today, a lot of people who are white nationalists, like Thor and Odin, they come onto it through Hinduism because, there's over 1 billion Hindus and they're all over and they're keep on entering countries, and usually they're very successful. And so people start studying Hindu text, and then they realize that they've lost their own identity. So there's been a connection for hundreds of years, at least going back. Germany was the first major society in Europe that took an interest in Vedic Hindu wisdom, but it basically permeates all of Europe now. In American society, yoga and all this stuff is very popular. Post-liberal age, why do they look east so much? Well, I mean, you're saying we're new global age, and so for a period of time, the rise and fall of nations was mostly the Middle East or Europe, and even England, Spain, when it was a global power. They really only controlled a small percentage of the earth. And then there's the time of colonization where all the European powers are trying to acquire a larger wealth and colonize larger portions of the world. And so you have the Dutch, get South Africa and New Zealand, the English, Australia, and I think the French are all over. And but in this new global age, you need to know every part of the world. I do speak Yiddish pretty well. Like relatively, I'm not a native Yiddish speaker. I learned it as an adult, but I understand Yiddish pretty well. I could get by in German. I occasionally deal with like automotive engineers here in Detroit, and I'll speak a few words of German. I've worked on my German a little bit, but like I don't really speak German that well. But I could actually probably recognize like 3/4 of words. If I was reading German writing, I would probably recognize 3/4 of the words, which in terms of reading, isn't that good, only 3 or 4, but it's enough to get something out of it. The Kabbalah, I've been studying Kabbalah for a long time. Like I like Kabbalah. It takes years and years of study. Maybe eventually I'll be able to talk more about Kabbalah. I was thinking of doing a series on Albert Pike, Morals and Dogma by Albert Pike. If people see here on my screen all my books on Freemasonry, let's check. Yes, I have quite a few books here on Freemasonry. Like my shelf is overflowing because I had all my books on one shelf, but I keep on buying more books. And this is a great book, Albert Pike, Morals and Dogma. I was thinking about doing a whole series on Scottish Rite Freemasonry, all 34 degrees. And anyone who's read it knows that Kabbalah plays a huge part in Scottish Rite Freemasonry, and I think that it deserves a revisiting. To modern Freemasonry, it's not properly understood. A lot of the greatness of Freemasonry has been lost, and it could have a revival. And I think Albert Pike might be popular among the alt-right because he was part of the Confederates, although he wasn't necessarily involved in slavery or anything. He was the Confederate emissary to the Cherokee Nation. Actually, I'm part Cherokee, and he's a pretty popular figure. But the Scottish Rite these days is probably the most famous, popular form of Freemasonry. And Kabbalah is a good subject and probably benefit people. Especially if you're non-Jewish, the Kabbalah is probably more interesting than all this Jewish law. The Lashon Hara, the hate speech, I hope is Daystar. How old is the Kabbalah? So, I mean, according to the theory that Kabbalah is God's wisdom, Kabbalah is actually the system through how God runs the world, how God, the God's power and the spiritual elements permeate the physical realms, saying Kabbalah is the truth. Kabbalah was always the system from Adam, from the creation of the world till today. So if you have another explanation for the source of Kabbalah, you might like Enoch. I have these books here actually on Enoch. Here I got the book of Enoch, and actually this is Apocrypha, but the Bible, there's the prophet Enoch who doesn't die, walks with God, and there's Apocrypha. It's actually written in Hebrew or different languages going back before the Jesus and the Gospels is Enoch, and this Enoch societies. So it's interesting, and there's different understandings, but presumably Enoch is the the first person to. But the Kabbalah, there could be origins that Kabbalah is Hindu in origin or Egypt in origin. And someone was asking me the other day, and I mentioned it about the stolen treasures of Egypt, and that some people claim that Freemasonry or Kabbalah was the treasure that was stolen from Egypt. And there's some evidence that the Egyptians, archaeological evidence that there had been some form of Kabbalah in Egypt. Certainly Freemasonry, there's evidence of like the initiation rites in the priestly class, and they at least had a 3-degree system or a 7-degree system in ancient Babylon and in ancient Egypt that the priest used for initiating people, that is similar to the initiation system used today. You can hear the fireworks in the background. What's PLA? Lack of Jewish influence in PLA. Was that Palestinian Liberation? I'm not sure what that is. Granada 1066. Was that some sort of post-liberal age? Granada 1066. I'd have to look that up. I don't know if that's some sort of like pogrom or if that was part of the Crusades, or if that was the Granada massacre. I have read about that. I'm just looking it up on Wikipedia. When Arab Muslim mob stormed the royal palace of Granada, crucified the Jewish viceroy Joseph ben Negrella and massacred much of the Jewish population. Estimates of deaths are up to 4,000 people. Generally, what happened in the era is, the Jews were money lenders and were emissaries to the aristocrats. So whenever they lost power, the Jews got slaughtered. And when I showed at the very beginning these graphs and charts of Jewish populations, like in Europe, there was less than 1 million Jews in the world from the Roman destruction really till like the 1700s. And so there weren't too many Jews in many areas. And a lot of times the expulsions, crusades, Muslims conquering or going back and forth between different warlords, that the Jews would be moneylenders or advisors to the local nobility or king. And when they fell and another power took them over, God forbid, the Jews got slaughtered. And but the population wasn't so big. So the 1066 massacre in Granada, was related to the battles between the Muslims and the Christians and the Jews choosing sides. And even these elements, like the Bible says in Exodus, these people, the Jews, have gotten so big in Egypt that they might side with your enemies. You have to be wary of the Jews because they're a minority in society. But if they side with the enemies of the nation, that could cause the downfall of the nation. And many times throughout Jewish history, you'll find that dynamic, like in Spain, where you have Muslims and Christians fighting, where sometimes the Jews are on the side of the Muslims and sometimes they're on the side of the Christians, or like in Poland and Ukraine, where sometimes the Jews are on the side of the Polish and sometimes they're on the side of the Ukraine. So when the two sides go back and forth and are fighting each other, where the Jews, God forbid, pogroms or even massacres, when the power structures change hands. And that's a pretty common thread throughout history. I mean, your Daystar, like how many spheres are there? There's 10 of them. I mean, according, there's 10 spheres in 4 worlds, although some of them are repeated. There's different systems. I can't really give a whole class on the Kabbalah. Maybe I'll do that. There's might be other information. I've actually looked. There's really not too much good stuff on Kabbalah on the web or on YouTube, even in Hebrew. There's an edX course offered by, let me see if I'll find the link. There's a good course in, Spacetime's asking about faith alone. No, I mean, generally, faith is just one of the 613 mitzvahs. That faith is important, but no, faith alone will not help you, and you need to do all the good deeds, all the mitzvahs. There's stories like about how people with faith were saved. Here's the best thing on Kabbalah I've seen. It's a course on edX from Hebrew University. I put in the link on the chat if anyone is interested in taking it. There's books and material, and maybe I'll make a point, like book recommendations. I have a lot of books. I mean, if there's a lot of interest, I could show some basic books off my shelf. Introduction to Kabbalah. Here's 2 ones. Let me just check to make sure it's appearing right in the screen. This is Philip Berg, actually, from the Kabbalah Center, Kabbalah for the Layman. It's a good introduction. Song of the Soul. I think this may have been Yidid Nefesh. This was one of the most popular books in Israel, translated into English. Song of the Soul, Introduction to Kabbalah. There's from the Ramchal, who I did the Path of the Just from series. He had many books on Kabbalah. One is called Kalak Pittei Chacham, which is like 138 Leaves of Wisdom. That's an extremely good book. So there's a lot of material on Introduction to Kabbalah. But to some extent, Kabbalah is extremely complicated. And the Tanya, people know the Lubavitch book, the Tanya. In the back, I think Emmanuel Shulkit, Rabbi Shulkit, has an introduction to Jewish mysticism. There's a lot of stuff on introductions to this stuff that you could find. It's funny, there's 15 people watching. What I was thinking I was going to do, I'm not sure if there's any more like Ask the Rabbi type questions, or people have any more questions you want me to answer, because I had that big debate last week with JF, and I'm not sure if he's going to have me on next Tuesday. I wanted to respond because basically I was arguing the negative for evolution, where my point was just to show that evolution's a weak theory, and it doesn't, you can't really rely on evolution to explain the origins of consciousness or humans, that there's the concept of natural selection, these mechanisms that you could, I have a lot of value for like bacteria and infections and in some scientific value, and I encourage JF to keep on researching that as a scientist. But in terms of explaining the origins of humans or the origins of consciousness, I don't give too much credence to evolution being able to describe that. But people were really on me for they wanted a positive evidence for the soul, and kind of like, how could I as a scientist, like I'm a scientist, like you see I got books all over, like this is all I do. I study science constantly. I study math, and I could do, I'm not like a PhD in anything, but I do more construction management, civil engineering, but I could do like basic lectures like Judaism 101. I could do physics. I was a physics and calculus teacher. I do I study mathematics in my spare time, and I wanted to do an overview of like science, empirical method, some of the ancient Greeks, the soul, the logical proofs for the soul, the logical proof for God, and a lot of it's pretty generic. I found a bunch of PowerPoint presentations on YouTube. I mean, on Google, and I thought I'd do a presentation just as a rebuttal to people attacking me in the chat. It's funny, I got 17 people watching me now, and I'm about done. I don't really have anything left on Judaism or Ask the Rabbi. And even though there's 17 people watching now, I don't see any questions. No one seems to be asking any questions. I appreciate people being here and finding me interest. Well, I think it's defendable. I mean, that's why I'm going to go through them, and you'll see if you come back. I might take a break, eat a Greek salad, and come back at like 10 o'clock and start presenting this. And I'll show you the history of science. And I don't know if you actually know the history of science. What the empirical method, what science could actually show or not. But I want to make that for a different stream. This was more the Jewish stream, and that other stream will be pure European Western thought, and will basically have nothing Jewish. It'll be Plato, Aristotle, Newton, Bacon, Descartes, and there won't be anything Jewish about it besides me. So I think I'm going to end this and make a separate stream, unless Oswald Spring. I apologize, Oswald. I mean, I don't know. I mean, I'm pretty sure that's probably not your real name, but you had asked that on the other stream, and I missed that. So thanks for repeating. What do you think of Betsy Devos? Do you think John Calvin was a Jew named John Cohen, whose name changed through history? I've never heard anything about Calvin being a Jew. Anything's possible. If you if you take a Kabbalistic interpretation of the dispensational changes of the world, the important spiritual progressions of the world coming through Jewish people, you might want to believe that Calvin was a Jew, although I've never seen any positive evidence for that. I like the teachings of Calvin, the indiscriminate election, and it's interesting theology, and I would like to have theological streams also. I mean, time is limited, and I've been doing like 20 years of research. Like, as I said, I'm not officially a rabbi, as I said in the other stream. I'm just a Jew who wanted to know my traditions and wanted to be able to serve God. I don't have a pulpit. I have no venue besides for my own YouTube page, or people might invite me on YouTube to even share any of this wisdom. But I love this stuff, and it's interesting to me. And Betsy Devos, she's a big friend of the Orthodox community, related to what we're talking about, like evolution and the soul. Actually, like, I don't like evolution. I don't want to teach my kids evolution. I believe we have a soul. In private schools and Christian schools, and a reverse on the secular trends in education. So among secular Jews, like, God forbid, Betsy Devos is like the boogie woman. Like she's like the worst of the worst. Among Orthodox Jews, she's the best thing about President Trump. And even in my area, letters were sent out to Orthodox Jews to support Donald Trump, specifically because of Betsy Devos. And obviously her brother, she's from Michigan. But in terms of Orthodox Jews nationally in America, for what specifically interests the Orthodox Jewish community, education, charter schools, vouchers, allowing us to teach our kids as we see fit. That's one of the single most important issues to Orthodox Jews in America. And so in that sense, to Orthodox Jews, Betsy Devos is basically a hero. And I've actually met I've met Dick Devos. I shook his hand. Betsy Devos' husband. I went to University of Michigan. I'm from Michigan, and he spoke in University of Michigan. There was a big crowd, and I was sitting there like an hour before he spoke in the hall, and he came in with someone was giving him a tour, and I was the only one there, and he came in, and I shook his hand, and as a student, so that was it. He came in. I shook his hand, and then I heard his speech afterwards. So I've shaken Dick Davis's hand. Did you look at Jewish voter surveys in Europe? I don't know if I had data to that. Pew had it. I would go over that. It'd be interesting to me. And really, there's not too many Jews in Europe to have interesting voter surveys. England probably has the data available, maybe France. I don't know enough about the European politics. I know like John Morgan, who's actually also University of Michigan. I've met him personally. Was on Big Cat Kayla and JF talking about Hungary and a little bit of the how the Jews fit into that. I'd have to look in. If you had information want to forward that to me, I'd be interested to know. But obviously, I'm doing a lot of research on a lot of different things. Daystar, good works are said to come through faith, but whatever works for you. So, according to the Torah, there's 613 mitzvahs, and faith is one of those mitzvahs. To have faith in God, to trust in God is a mitzvah, to love God, to fear God are all mitzvahs, but there's 613 of them, and faith is just one of them. So faith in the matter that it strengthens a person following the law and doing the other mitzvahs is good, but faith alone is not a Jewish concept. There's some elements, we're saying, okay, are you going to go to hell or not? Maybe you could be saved, or the power of faith to permeate the person and change them and make them in accordance with the law and doing the other mitzvahs. But faith alone generally does not correspond with Judaism. Yeah, John Morgan of Countercurrents. I was friends with him on Facebook, actually, and I used to speak with him. I've met him in public, and I actually messaged him on Facebook the night he was on JF. A good intellectual. I encouraged him what he's doing in his book publishing. Obviously, we have disagreements about nationalism, but I respect his intellectualism, and we're also both part of like Hinduism, the Hare Krishna movement. Go Blue, University of Michigan. So I respect and encourage John Morgan in his work and his intellectual endeavors. And you notice that John Morgan has never made an ADL or SPLC hate list. He's part of pretty respected in the alt-right, Amren and that, but he's never been labeled with anything anti-Semitic or even racist. He's pretty clean, whatever, but he is, an identitarian and moved to Europe because he said, Greg Johnson says, the alt-right isn't doing too much in America. There's not much effort. It's very difficult to make any progress in identitarianism in America. But in Europe, there's a lot of practice, a lot of stuff going on, especially in Hungary where he is. And, so I respect John Morgan. I would stream with him. And I've read his book. I have his book that he wrote on the Hare Krishna movement. And, so we'll see about that. Poland. I don't know too much about Poland. I know that they just recently reversed some of the strong Holocaust law. I had a friend in rabbinic school. His father was actually chief rabbi Galicia, which is in part of Poland. There's a lot of Jews who visit Poland for the graveyards. I think you're going to find some Hasidim go back to Poland and resettle some of the Hasidic communities. I learned in Hasidic schools. The school I learned in Bobov is in modern day Poland. A lot of these towns are beautiful. They're still well kept, and they're just beautiful areas across Poland where the Jews lived before the war. And it's very possible that Poland would be friendly to the Hasidim moving back to this area. And but I don't know too much about it. Space-time, I've wondered if it would be possible for conservative UK Jews to somehow bring some US Jews back from their progressive. And it's probably not. I'm saying there's a divergence between different Jewish communities, and the interest of Jews in different areas is different. and the worldwide connection between Jews is pretty weak. So, just because you might have Jews that are conservative in one area has little effect on the politics of Jews in other area, because largely Jews have grown in their politics over tens, hundreds of years of history that have caused them to be like that in the area they reside. Post-liberal KMAC theory. Don't understand why you're not interested. I like KMAC, but I don't believe in evolution. I do believe in like the soul, the group evolutionary strategy of the Jews as like a collective soul consciousness to the Jews, that there is some collective soul, higher powers that make the Jews function. Relatively, on any level that you look at it, Jews don't function as a cohesive unit. There might be trends, like remembering the Holocaust, fighting anti-Semitism, Passover, Hanukkah, but there is no cohesive unit among Jews. So you say like Mark Zuckerberg, who married a Chinese woman, has a half Chinese kid, is going to be pushing in the same direction as like Hasidic Jews or all these different type Israeli Jews, or like, Google, the Sergey Brin or whatever, the Russian Jews, and I don't even know, the half Jews that created Google. And all, are they really, or like Stephen Mnuchin, who converted to Christianity and married that famous Scottish woman, and all these different type people, Jared Kushner, Ivanka Trump, like we're not really on one page. But from a collective spiritual sense, you say, yeah, there's some collective Jewish strategy that I don't think it's attributable to genes and evolution like KMAC. I think it's attributable to a Jewish soul or biblical prophecy. And a lot of Christians would probably agree with that too. They might look at KMAC and just be like, of course, haven't you read the Bible? And that's kind of how I look at it. But I like his research and appreciate KMAC. Harris is saying John Morgan has made it onto SBL articles. I'm not sure, but he hasn't. I don't think there's anything bad about him on it, and I don't think John Morgan's ever said anything that would make him a subject of that. And he's pretty educated and pretty well spoken, but I'm not sure if I'm inaccurate about that. I don't know. Following up on Davis, what do you think about the Acton Institute? I gotta Google that to see. It sounds vaguely familiar, but like when I went into the debate with JF, it's hard to keep my mind so fresh to to remember things. And American Research and Educational Institute, think tank, Grand Rapids, promote free speech in virtual society characterized by individual liberty and sustain. I probably support it, generally. I don't know too much about it. I may have read some of their articles. I'm not too familiar because unfortunately I don't have children. I haven't found the right woman. And, but in generally, like a lot of times you find coalition people that will, the whole thing of politics is making coalitions of people. And, so the Acton Institute might be the type group that people I know would coalition with, even though we probably have severe disagreements on certain theological principles. In the greater respect of Michigan or national politics, we would probably coalition with them. Content Ratch, are Jews supposed to not honor national holidays like 4th of July? Jews should be good citizens of America. If it's like fireworks, a lot of Jews will have a barbecue. Fireworks, I'm not so sure. They're saying like you should respect the country you live in, respect the government, be a good citizen, law-abiding citizen. If it means like respecting the police, respecting the army, respecting the government, but in terms of like joining a pagan ritual or going to fireworks or something like that, I don't think that's a mitzvah. So you got to find some sort of middle ground. Space-time, do you think U.S. Jews progressivism can continue for much longer? It seems riddled with contradictions. Yeah, I agree it's riddled with contradictions. It's like the debate we had 2 nights ago. So if multiculturalism continues and whites, only become a plurality and they decrease from the majority, yeah, I think white Jewish progressivism will actually continue to increase. So, but if the backlash of and whites form and maintain the majority, and there's a backlash against pushes to make America a multicultural nation, then might come to odds. So and largely that will be the whites in America's decision. And so if the whites in America decide that they don't mind being a plurality, and they don't mind it being a multicultural society through electoral politics, yeah, I presume the Jews will only strengthen. And what you see what's happening on the right now in terms of elections, like Patrick Little and the alt-right, ethnic nationalism versus civic nationalism, and you're going to find that more and more on the right. On the left, you're finding like that woman in New York who a Democratic socialist that on the left, like the Hillary Clinton big business Democratic Wall Street funded Democratic party is going to be being fought by Democratic socialism. So in that respect, it'll probably be fought out at the ballot box, and you'll see that 2018 and 2020, where you might have a Democratic socialist candidate, and you might find that the Jews generally are more likely not only to be Democrat, but are more likely to favor democratic socialism, and that will ring true to people who studied World War II and conspiracy theory, and there might be a certain trend and truth to that. So we'll have to see what happens, and but I wouldn't count on that. It's likely that the Jews will become even more and more progressive, and that's like my KMAC type thing, where we're saying there is kind of like a Jewish push that the nature of the Jew, what's in the best interest of the Jew, might not correspond to what's in the best interest of other people. It should, and we should make our best to do that. But there'll be certain trends and likelihood that it's very likely that Jews in America will always favor more open immigration and multicultural society. And even if we lose on it, even if the whites, rally and gain control and have a government and shut it down, that the Jews will still be opposed to that. But we'll still try to be good citizens and good Americans. But we'll just oppose that policy, like the Jews in other countries across Europe that have a much less power, but still probably promote similar issues. Post-liberal, I meant to say Jews are really different depending on which country they came from. Yeah, I mean, obviously. So that's why I'm saying Jews around the world have a hard time influencing other Jews, because the difference between Jews from different nations are so vast. And, Jews' power and lifestyle is largely based on the society they've came from, and is different if you have a Jew who just recently came to some place that might be more international, as opposed to a Jew who's resided in a country for generations or hundreds of years, as a lot of Jews in America have been here for many generations already. Oswald is in Grand Rapids. I know some Grand Rapids Jews, the Chabad rabbi, secular rabbis. I know the Chabad rabbi from Grand Rapids, Cousins. I'd have to search his name. I know they have a menorah lighting in Grand Rapids. I don't know. There's only a few hundred Jews there. I try to see the name of the rabbi. If I forget the name, Weinberger or Weingarten or something. I think that's the name of the rabbi. There's someone Reuter, and there's even like secular rabbis in I probably met all the rabbis from Grand Rapids. I don't know them that well. And there are a few hundred Jews in Grand Rapids, but not like thousands. Abdul Saeed. I've met Abdul Saeed. He came to Oak Park. I shook hands. He's also U of M alumni. I liked him. It's interesting. Abdul Saeed had a George Soros scholarship. He's not necessarily funded by George Soros, but George Soros awarded the George Soros Foundation is the scholarship that Abdul Saeed had when he went to Columbia. He's probably met George Soros. He seemed very intelligent and likable and saying the right things. I don't usually vote. I kind of like Sri Thanadur, the Indian. I mean, I like everybody in terms like most politicians when they get to that level are pretty accomplished people on the Republican side. Lena Epstein, if you know her in my area, the Trump for Michigan, we're members of the same synagogue. A kid I went to his bar mitzvah, the same synagogue as Lena Epstein, who's running for Congress in my area. I've met her. I'm friends with her on Facebook. Although I'm not going to vote for anybody in my area, thank God. Metro Detroit, I'm usually friends with the Republican and Democratic candidates. So I've met Abdul Saeed. I've met some of the Republican candidates also. Maximilian, have Jews ever been in contact with the Mongol emperor? It's interesting that some of my ancestors supposedly came from Mongolia to the Ukraine, and so I mean you have to look in history when the Jews were in Mongolia. If it was the Persian, the Afghani Jews, or Mongolia captured part of that territory and was under the control of the Mongols, or the Mongols came into Europe. So there's a Mongol Jewish connection. I have to do more research on that. Alt-right Jew streams are more American Jewish. Stop projecting your experiences onto other. Well, I'm not projecting my experience onto other. I'm just talking about my own personal experience, my intention. You could speak for yourself. When David is honest about the way the Jews have divergent interests from the people in the nations, it's because he thinks we don't have the balls to do anything about that, and he's smart. Not necessarily. I think just in your interest to know the interest of other people. And you're saying we could always be opposed to this, saying Jews are a demographic minority. So even if we always are in favor of immigration and multiculturalism, and we might always lose that battle. But yeah, I'd say even like 300 years from now, if the Jews are a minority in America, we're still, and somehow the whites maintain the majority, and 300 years we keep on losing at the ballot box and at the city hall, that Jews will probably still be multicultural and progressive in that manner. And it doesn't make us our enemy. And no, I didn't say you don't have the balls to do anything about it. But you have to win the battle in City Hall. You have to win the battle in the city square. And good luck with that. And I don't think it's a problem. I don't think Jews should be embarrassed. The poll data is pretty clear. I'm not like divulging Jewish secrets. You could look at any poll data and find this information. Space, the move on the left from pro to anti-Israel has an impact on politics of European Jews. I see the same thing beginning to happen over there too. Yeah, here in America, younger Jews are protesting Israel, like the ethno-nationalism, like how could you be ethno-nationalist in Israel but not here in America? So a lot of younger Jews can't handle that contradiction. And the Palestinians, there's a growing amount of Palestinians. You go to university, there's Palestinian student groups everywhere. So younger Jews are more and more becoming anti-Israel in America. So in Europe, the governments are becoming more anti-Israel. In America, the government's still very pro-Israel. However, Jews are probably even more anti-Israel. Younger Jews are probably even more anti-Israel than the U.S. government or the U.S. population in general. Post-liberals saying the last Dutch elections, Jews voted more right than whites. Possible. Saying Jews in different areas might have different interests or different reasons to do what they do. And I was saying Dutch is already generally a socialist society. So like here in America, where capitalist Jews are on the left, in the Netherlands, where it's already, they have a royalty and it's a socialist government, it's possible that they're far enough to the left that the Jews are on the right. Contents adding some information about Russian and Mongolian Jews. There is a connection, although I'm not an expert on that. Space-time, a fair chunk of U.S. Jews will become civil national republic. It's possible, but no, the data is not showing that. There hasn't been a big switch of Jews from Democratic to Republican. Like Hindus, Chinese, other minorities that have become wealthier are more likely to switch to Republican than Jews. You could look at the demographic data, but Jews have been pretty stable on the left, as opposed to Hindus and Chinese. And even Hispanics that are more likely to switch over to the right. Dutch Jews vote for fundamentalist Christian parties. It could be. You have to tell me more about that. It's interesting, but yeah, said that it's Jews, their interest or strategy of the Jews in different countries. You have to know the nature of the country they live in. Connection between Judaism and Rh negative blood types. I'm not an expert on biology. I was pre-med, but I'd have to read articles about that. I'm not sure. U.S. Jews just need to articulate to them who their real friends are. But Jews are generally universal people. Jews don't want to have to choose a side Jews want to be universal. We're world international people. So usually it's a bad situation already when the Jews have to take one side against the other. Or if we do, it has to be strategic, saying, okay, Jews in the coalition of minorities, but Israel enjoys large bipartisan support, and Jews are relatively very popular on the left and the right. So we don't want to be in the situation where we have to choose sides. What does it mean to be an anti-Israel Jew? Will they throw rocks at the IDF? I mean, it depends, but usually it just means that they are so in opposition to the policies of the state of Israel that they'll actively, maybe they'll even take part in boycott, divestment, sanctions, or vote and protest Israel. But militarily, very rarely. Notori Karta is from the few groups that will actually team up with so-called the enemies of Israel, like they went to the Iranian Holocaust seminar and met with President Ahmadinejad, and they met with Hamas and neo-Nazis in Europe. But very rarely will you find that extreme among Jews to just like protest or voice a little bit of support or try to help out Palestinians. I don't know too much about David Duke. I know he was on the JF show. If someone organized for me to debate him, I might. I've watched him a little bit before. I think his scholarship he might know more about history than me. His scholarship on Judaism is probably minimal. To have JF organized a debate with me, I would probably do it, but I don't know too much about him. Stay in my lane. We're in different lanes. The South is different than the North. Are different parts where Jews are a much smaller minority than parts where Jews have more power. Spengler, half-sister, is a secular Jew from the father's side. According to Orthodox Judaism, then she's not Jewish at all. It's only from the mother. So that's a sectarian answer. According to Israel, she might be able to have the right to return or reform Jews, or she would have to convert. But according to most Orthodox Jews, it goes from the mother. King Kaufnus, Talmud translation, coroner, art scroll. Yes, I saw you asked that last time. I'm glad to answer that. They're both good. Art scroll's pretty good. Really, if you're really into the Talmud, I use this link here on the web. It's very good and it's free. You can make a donation, but this is out of Israel. It's a kollel that studies the page of Talmud each day and puts out a lot of reports. So they're both good, Koran or Art Scroll. Or if you're really into studying, you can read both translations or try to like the Yeshiva University link I showed earlier. Torah Anytime. There's so many different places for Talmud. So all of the above. I'm not going to say one's necessarily better than the other. They have slightly different theologies, takes on it. That if you study a little bit of it, you'll see their bias. As they say, commentary is really translation's really already commentary. Content Watcher, abstract theology question: what shows God of being worthy of being obeyed? He had led the Jews out of Egypt, but he also gave them a lot of hard times. That we discussed in Duties of the Heart, that someone could objectively look and say, we have a creator. The creator bestowed unparalleled beneficence upon me. Just the fact that I'm alive, I have the ability to prosper. There's a world where largely everything is provided for me, even though there's a lot of suffering, that Jew or non-Jew alike has the obligation to recognize and submit to our Creator. Besides the fact that God chose the Jewish people and led us out of Egypt and gave us the Torah, but let alone a non-Jew who wasn't given the Torah and wasn't taken out of Egypt, but just the fact of the way the world was created and the benevolent way the world functions is enough that any person could just examine the world, examine their soul, examine history, examine the scripture, and submit, just like you should submit and serve your father. And you look like, well, thanks, Mom, Dad, you brought me into this world, you cared for me, you brought me up. So too, you should submit and serve the Creator. Brother Nathaniel, Spacetime, he's the one that the Supreme Court in Israel case I mentioned a few times, where Israel ruled that he couldn't become a citizen of Israel because he converted to Christianity, which actually goes against Jewish law. According to Jewish law, even if you convert to Christianity, you're still a Jew, And Israel went against that and said that if you convert to Christianity, you're no longer considered a Jew. It's an interesting case, like where the people should know that I mention that Brother Nathaniel case all the time. So I'm glad you're educated on the issue. And, that's one of the divergences between the state of Israel and Jewish law. Okay, I'll let you, Mongolia, you guys probably do more research. Like, it's interesting to me. I don't have any interesting thing to add on that. What shows God as being worthy of being obeyed? I meant obeyed in the sense of the Torah and the commandments. It's just like what shows your father worthy of being obeyed. So it's different if your father was even if your father wasn't a righteous person and he still brought you into this world and treated you and provided for you as a child and gave you over wisdom, that you should obey your father. But if your father gives you bad advice, you might serve and love and honor your father, but you're not going to obey him because if your father gives you bad advice. But you could be smarter than your father. You can't be smarter than God. So in that sense, the parallels think, okay, well, why should you obey your father? All the more so, why should you obey God? And the reasons you could say that you shouldn't obey your father don't apply to God because, God isn't fallible like your father is. Space-time, once the U.S. left goes full anti-Israel, there will be a change in their was here. That's interesting demographics. That's possible. We'll see what happens. Post-liberal. Okay, yeah, man, I still got a minion here. So out of questions, I think I'm going to sign off. My roommate just came in, so there might be some noise in the background. I want to eat, and I said if I have the strength, I might come back on in like 30 minutes and do the scientific streaming. They'll be less interesting. To me, that might be more interesting, but they'll be more intellectual and just like presentations. If there's anyone who has expertise in science, I don't know enough about E. Michael Jones. If he just has preaching generic Catholic theology, or if he's gone beyond the Catholic theology into anti-Semitic rhetoric. I saw parts of him on Luke Ford, and I think basically everything that E. Michael Jones was saying was like Augustine, Aquinas, Bonaventure, Martin Luther or something. So I'm gonna so if he's just in line with the generic Catholic tradition, or if he's got something new, maybe with the movement critic Rodney, he wants to have a talk about the historical Jesus, the rise of the church, and he's forwarded me some books on that. But I think if you're a Catholic scholar, saying is he really just saying what the Catholic sages has been saying since since the founding of the church? Okay, I think I'm going to sign off. God bless. I appreciate you people being on, and that's why I get this up there. If I have time, I'm going to add a table of contents to it, and I might stream tomorrow with Brundlefly on immigration statistics, where we're be more autistic, and we're going to be looking at numbers and some serious numbers about what's going on with immigration and multiculturalism in America. So enough of the arguments and ideas, and to look at some actual numbers. And it's possible later tonight or tomorrow I'm going to come on and do the science stuff. So if any of you want to see that, that'll be more visual, be presentations. I found quite a few PowerPoints, and I'll be going over PowerPoints. So great night. Shalom. Thanks for joining me. God bless.